Welcome to the Content Champion podcast. We provide the training and tools to help you become a content marketing champion in your online business. Introducing your host, the content champion himself, Loz James.
Hi guys, welcome to the Content Champion podcast. Thank you for listening. It means a lot to me. Just a quick announcement, the Content Champion Academy launches soon. So to secure early bird discount pricing, join our VIP list now at contentchampion.com/academy. On the show this time, I'm speaking with highly experienced content marketer Robert Gibb, who helps tech startups with all aspects of content strategy and content marketing, and is also lead content marketer at MaxCDN, the market-leading content delivery network. Since 2014, Robert has massively grown MaxCDN's traffic and subscribers using a refined and strategic approach to content marketing. And it's his repeatable process that we're discussing today. Let's dive in. Thanks for coming on, Robert.
Thanks for having me, Loz.
Now, in this show, we're going to talk about your strategic approach to content marketing and how strategically focusing on creating quality content grew your traffic and subscribers, far more so than pumping out less well-researched content more regularly. Before we delve into that, though, could you tell us your backstory first, please?
For sure, Loz. So I want to preface this with a little bit of wisdom. So in my experience, content marketing, you don't find it, it finds you. And that's how I kind of got into this. So if you think about it, when's the last time you talked to someone that said, oh, I wanted to be a content marketer when I was in school, or I went to school for content marketing? Usually like that really never happens. So a little bit about my journey. I went to school for creative writing, fiction actually. I did some journalism classes. After graduating, I really didn't find any opportunities out there. I didn't want to live in my parents' basement. I didn't want to write the next best novel. I did want to do that, but it just wasn't feasible. I needed work. So I started freelancing as a copywriter, took up some internet marketing positions as an entry level at different shops. And after that, I got a job at an agency as a content writer. And that's when I kind of first experience with content marketing. At the agency, they were not doing it well at all, or they weren't even doing it at the time. This was about 3 years ago, and the term was just starting to take off. But that's when I first got a look at like how content marketing can actually help people. So I left the agency, started freelancing again as a content marketer, and really focused on goals, which a lot of people don't set in content marketing. So I kind of built up a client base, and then I took a job in Los Angeles at an awesome tech startup called MaxCDN, and that's where I'm at now. I do content marketing for them. Just a brief overview, CDN is basically a collection of servers around the world. You can put copies of your website on them, and we'll deliver them to your users a lot faster because our servers, they deliver content based on where your users are. So it's a good web performance boost for your website, and it can kind of help you out. So that's where I'm at now.
A few things that come out of that. I'm just going to pick that apart. Your experience up to now kind of mirrors mine exactly. Started at sort of journalism college. I got into a bit of the fiction writing as well. Went to screenwriting college as well, and then sort of fell into copywriting.
Yeah.
And now I've been in content marketing. Well, kind of the whole time really, but in just different forms. That's what we're going to talk about today. But I noticed you mentioned goals there, and this is something that I know a lot of people struggle with. And it all comes down to, content strategy, content marketing strategy, the difference between the two. And I know that goal setting in terms of your business goals and goal setting in terms of your content marketing goals, they sit in different parts of that equation. So could you start by perhaps outlining the difference between the two of those?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not really a big fan of terms, but I usually put everything into one bucket, content marketing or content marketing strategy. But if I had to break it down, I would say content strategy has three aspects primarily. It's the planning of the goal. So that's where you set your goal. What do you want the content to do? content type, what type of content can achieve that goal, and the content topic, what's going to engage people. And then for content marketing strategy, I would say that's more about the creation, the publishing, and the distribution of that. And then you kind of measure it from there. So yeah, content strategy, it's kind of like the pre-creation. Content marketing strategy is during the creation and post-creation, I would say.
Okay, so really boiling it down, we've got to write down what we're going to do and then do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go to MaxCDN, where you went from publishing. I think you were publishing twice a week when I first came across your work, and you were in your sort of what you call non-strategy mode. And then you went to creating more sort of weighty, well-researched pieces with a more strategic focus, and your traffic went up, I think, by something like a factor of 5. So tell us how your process evolved and why it's had to.
Sure. So when I came on board at MaxCDN, I didn't have much authority with the company. So I was kind of just going by what I was told to do. They already had an idea of what content marketing was, and it probably wasn't the most fleshed out definition. So when I came on, I was pretty much just sticking to an editorial calendar. I was thinking, what can I do? What can I write about to hit that editorial mark of 1 to 2 posts a week? There was really no goal there. So that's what I call non-strategy mode. And so when I say strategy mode, I mean, having a goal like we talked about before. What is that goal for the content? What number do you want? Do you want a number of subscribers per week? Do you want a revenue number? So there was no goal. It was mainly it was all about appearance. So are we publishing 1 to 2 times a week? If yes, we're successful. If not, Rob, what are you doing? So I kind of saw a problem with that. So it forced me to step back a little. And this actually happened at an opportune time because my marketing manager, who's great, he had to go back to Australia. And I saw this as an opportunity to really step back and get away from that appearance-based content marketing. So where you're just publishing for the pure aspect of the number and publishing something. So I started experimenting with, a little longer form pieces, and I would reach out to different influencers and kind of get their take on things. This is something called minimum viable content. It doesn't take a lot to create. I'll talk about that later on. But so basically I spent a month just getting all this advice from different industry experts, and I put a post together about it. It was kind of an interview style, but I also had some pieces that were key takeaways in there. And after publishing that, we didn't really publish anything that month except for this. And what happened was it made something called Y Combinator Hacker News, and it brought in 10,000 people that single day after publish. And what happened for us was not just traffic, that was great, but we actually saw a revenue number from that. So we had about 20 to 30 same day signups. And a sign-up can be anywhere from $9 to a couple $1,000s. So it was a really big win for us. And that's when I stepped back and said, what can we do to kind of mesh this quality consistency? Because we were doing the consistent part before, but we weren't really listening to what the people wanted, our audience. And so that's what came from that piece.
Okay, well, let's drill down into that audience focus then, because that's at the heart, isn't it, of creating quality content. How can we gain a better understanding of our target audience so that we can relate to them more and get more engagement?
Okay, so to figure out your audience, I would say if you're an in-house content marketer, definitely sit next to your sales team because they're a wealth of information. They're talking to customers every day. And if you can get on some of those calls, that's great. Take advantage of that if you're in-house. Also, if you have a support team, the same thing goes for that. They're actually helping people. They're answering questions regarding the actual product and how to go up and like problems with the product, successes with the product. So see what's going on there. So if you're in-house, work within departments. That's a really good way to figure out some who your audience is while coming up with different content topics to cover. And then aside from that, I mean, this is talked about nearly every day. Like there's a blog post about, finding your audience, but it's different for everyone. So our audience is tech focused. They're mostly developers and IT people, chief technology officers. So I use LinkedIn. I go on groups on LinkedIn a lot to see what the chatter is and kind of see what kind of lingo is being used. I subscribe to newsletters in the tech space. I just do anything I can to get a feel on what our audience is talking about and what they want to learn about.
And I guess when you've got that audience focus, you know exactly who you're talking to. The whole process of creating engaging content becomes that much easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let's go on to look at the editorial process you've got going on there. This is obviously essential, but I know you've talked about in the past, you should be able to be flexible with this. You shouldn't constrain yourself within that if quality is being compromised. So how does that pan out for you at MaxCDN?
So right now at MaxCDN, we're actually back on a content calendar that's pretty strict. We like to hit the dates on there. But if we don't, it's like no one comes screaming at you, what's going on? Why didn't this get published? Just because we've proven ourselves in the content space and the marketing department that, we know what we're doing. So if you give us the time we need, we'll make cool stuff happen. But so we do stuff on a consistent basis, but we're also quality driven and goal driven. So if those goals aren't being met, we'll step back and say, is this strict content calendar in our best interest, or should we take a step back, kind of like what we did before, and reevaluate it? So the editorial process, it's all dependent on the goals we're hitting, whether or not we're hitting them.
How are you measuring those goals? When you're aligning those content marketing goals at the beginning with that sort of customer avatar, as it were, then that piece of high quality content, how are you using metrics to define whether you've completed that cycle and you've been a success with it? Yeah,
so to determine whether we're successful in our content creation and marketing, we look at the goals we set out. So right now, the goal for us is to hit a certain revenue number. So we use HubSpot, Salesforce, and a bunch of other tools to connect content to revenue. And we set a different number each month, pretty much like a different goal. So if we're not hitting that goal, that means we need to go back and look at the different type of content we can create to hit that goal.
Okay. And you mentioned the technology there. They're all great systems, but maybe a small business listening to this or a startup that doesn't have those resources, the strategy is essential, isn't it? And getting everything sort of in a line and doing it all properly in line with your overall strategic process. But you can use anything, any tech to do this, can't you? But I would add as well, is it a case that, if you want to define those goals in terms of your metrics, it is easier if you have got HubSpot or something similar?
Yeah, and obviously HubSpot, it can be pretty expensive. I know we pay a couple grand a month for it. So I would start small. Like obviously don't go out and buy like a huge marketing automation system if you don't really need it. There are smaller, even free tools, I believe, where you can do this. You can use Google Analytics. You can attach UTMs. You can use Google Analytics and put tracking codes on landing pages and success pages. So you can do a lot of stuff in Google Analytics, but we kind of grew out of that because we needed a central place for everything that Google Analytics couldn't handle. So that's why we kind of, got HubSpot and Salesforce integrated. because our sales team uses Salesforce and the marketing mostly uses HubSpot. So, using Google Analytics for both of those departments doesn't make sense. But if you're a small business, definitely start there to measure your goals and how much revenue you're getting from content.
You're listening to the Content Champion podcast, showcasing the training and tools you need to become a content marketing champion in your online business.
Okay, another question that comes off the back of that, because I'm a content marketing nerd. Okay, marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. How do you define both within that system that you've just outlined?
Yeah, so a marketing qualified lead. So subscribers to our newsletter, we don't even consider that a lead at all. That's just kind of like building our audience. So leads can come from the subscriber base, but they aren't a lead themselves. So after that subscribership, there's the MQL, or marketing qualified lead. And that's someone that's shown interest in the product. Like maybe they reached out, they replied to a marketing automation email. They're just showing more engagement. And that's when we pass them off to sales. We have this whole identifier system. It's called BANT. And I honestly don't even know. I used to know what it stands for, but we kind of weighed that out. It was something about they spend a certain amount of money. They're part of a certain company, and they're a certain level of tech savvy, but we don't really use that anymore. So once someone's qualified in that respect, or just showing interest, we'll pass it on to sales. And pretty much for sales qualified leads, it's just interest. And if they're not interested enough, it'll get passed back to us to nurture more.
That's fascinating. So your email subscribers that many people have as that sort of almost marketing qualified lead, as it were, that engagement there at the top of that part of the funnel. Yours are really at the bottom of the first part of the funnel. You're not even calling them MQLs.
No, not at all. Because they become MQLs from the newsletter, I would say, because you're sharing content with them. If they click on a piece of content and then, download maybe a PDF. So once they download like a PDF or go to a webinar, then they'd become a marketing qualified lead, but not just because of the subscription. Okay.
So another thing just to throw in as well, we often look at different metrics. Some of them are vanity metrics, and these time with your goals as well. And you can have different kind of goals. Obviously, you can have goals on the back end to nurture people, to give great customer service and make more sales from existing clients. But there is a line of argument that says all goals really boil down to leads and sales. What's your take on that?
I would actually have to say, I would even go a step further and say all goals should be tied to revenue at the end of the day. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with me in the content marketing world.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you should always be able to attach a number to what you're doing. So just because you're getting a ton of traffic or whatever, it doesn't matter. You need to be hitting that number because it'll make your team stronger whenever you can show that, and you'll get rewarded as the content marketer. And even if you fail, you're not hitting the number, at least you can go back and iterate. You can make changes. So don't be afraid to set a goal for yourself in terms of revenue from content.
I guess it's coming from the copywriting side of things where, you do have, direct marketing techniques used, and, there are things tied in, revenue numbers tied in specifically with the content. It kind of makes me think when people say my ultimate goal isn't revenue, it's like brand awareness or something. Well, what the hell are you doing then? Kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So I was watching the hockey game last night over here in Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and I saw Geico advertisements all over. So that's an insurance company for people that don't have Geico in their country. But so they've kind of gotten to a point where they brand awareness might work just because they're so big and it just reinforces their brand to people that already know it. But if that was a smaller company, I would put a link under their logo. If you're doing brand awareness, like for a small business, put like a URL under there, like a very short URL, so you know if the thing's actually working. So I'm always driving through LA on the streets, and all these banner ads are coming up at me. Billboards. And I'm trying to determine, how do they measure the success of this? What would happen if you put a short URL and people actually, visited from that billboard, and you could track that? Obviously this would cause car crashes, but something like that. My mind's always wondering about tracking.
No, it has to have a direct purpose, even if it's just, attribution points taken back, so you can see where the content is driving those revenue numbers. It's intriguing to me, and there is no way of really completely squaring that circle, is there? In terms of, you can't ultimately totally refine that process, can you? There are grey areas in meeting revenue goals and attributing that totally to different specific pieces of content, aren't there?
Yeah, of course. So revenue, taking a step back. So revenue is like one of the most important goals you should set, but you're going to see things happen that aren't tied to revenue. For instance, that post that we wrote, we can put it in the show notes probably. So someone, I don't want to say the name, but a company almost as big as Google reached out to me specifically because of that post. They were kind of interested in learning more about CDNs, and they wanted to collaborate. And they hit up our sales team on our intercom chat on our website, and they're like, "Can I speak to Robert Gibb? I have a proposal for him." So that post did hit like a revenue goal, but it also has evergreen effects too. So like a year from now, who knows what can happen with it? Because just a year after publishing it, this very authoritative person at this huge company wanted to collaborate. So there's definitely things, you don't always think about, but I think revenue should definitely be the number one goal.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if the tech there is becoming inextricably a part of the content marketing process itself. And by that, I mean, if you have got your instant messaging type software, what's the one you mentioned there that you're running there?
Yeah, we use Intercom. It's freaking amazing.
So you can, if you've got that on that particular piece of content, you can, and someone like that contacts you and that leads to a sale, you've directly got that attribution.
And I love that you mentioned that, because we're working on that right now. We're looking to tie Intercom chats with the page that it comes from. So if it's a piece of content, the content team will get rewarded in some way. We're just trying to figure out to what extent that is right now.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. That'd be interesting to know how that all goes. Okay, let's keep rolling on then. Look at content promotion. And even if everything's obviously very high quality, we do need to strategically promote content so we're speaking to the right people in the right places, don't we?
That's exactly right. So in terms of content promotion, I used to, content promotion platforms like Outbrain, they work for very specific industries. I would say more B2C. We actually tried it out, as well as some other ones, and they just don't work for us. Our content was being featured on very low quality sites. The average time on page from those links, the sponsored links, weren't really that high, or they were like 20 seconds. So we weren't hitting the right audience. So we took a step back and we looked at manual outreach. So what I mean by manual outreach is looking at influencers in our space that their audience would find this content valuable. So I would make a hit list of people to reach out to based on the content topic. And whether it would be through LinkedIn or email, I would send them a note saying something simple like, "Hey, we just wrote this cool piece. If your audience is interested in it, maybe you want to share it." Or you can even just start a conversation like, "Hey, what do you think about this piece?" And then you can lead into them sharing it. Just be natural about it, but manual outreach, it's done way more than any paid promotion can do for us.
Okay, and I know you're saying it's manual, but are there any tools you're using with that process?
Oh man, I've yet to find a really good one. So if someone knows of one, please let me know, because it is all manual. It's all in a Excel sheet right now.
Okay. So look, you've done your audience research based on your business and your content marketing goals. You've got your high quality content up there. You are manually outreaching, creating connections with people to promote that content, and you are actively refining the process using various metrics of tying revenue back to those goals at the beginning. What happens and what do you do about it if that process doesn't work? What do you do to the content to get it to convert?
Oh, wow. So that's a good question. So if it's not working, like I think I talked about this a little before, you take a step back and you get very creative. So I know I mentioned minimum viable content. That's something I'm really big about. So minimum viable product is something that John Reese talks about in his book, The Lean Startup. And minimum viable audience is something Brian Clark at Copyblogger talks a lot about, where you do the minimum amount of work, but still focusing on quality to get the maximum number of subscribers. So minimum viable content, you can do this if your content isn't working. Look for ways to create content that isn't time intensive or, cash intensive. So that might be, I know for us, the blog wasn't really working for us at one time when I came on. So we started looking at different avenues. We did something called a visual glossary. So it was very simple. We just take a tech term, we define it, and we do a visual on it. So this was being done with text only before we did this visual glossary in the text space. And it was minimum viable because the articles only took about an hour to create. And that includes the actual graphic design that went into it. And from that initiative, our organic traffic has skyrocketed from 0 to almost 10,000 in about six to 8 months. And that content is getting linked to from the Google developers team and a bunch of other authoritative sites. So that's one type of minimum viable content. Obviously, it's not as maybe engaging as that blog post we did. But if you can figure out a piece of content that's working, it doesn't take a lot of time or money to create, and then you build from that, that's really great, because even if it doesn't work, you can go back to the drawing board, get creative, and figure out something else to do.
Okay, and something coming out of that, you mentioned at the start when you joined the company, the blog wasn't doing that great. So in terms of internal resources and buy-in, how did you approach that? How did you, say, I think we should do this and this is why, and get that buy-in and allocate the resources in line with that?
Yeah, so I work at an awesome company, so there wasn't really much pushback. Everyone was on the same page. We knew we wanted to make content marketing work for us just because our space values content over, ads being crammed in their face. So it really wasn't that hard to, pitch some new ideas and really put some resources, manpower, and money behind them. So yeah, it has a lot to do with where you work at. I didn't have to fight it all, but yeah, I know some people at other companies with, strict processes might.
The thing is about it is that working with clients, so I'm going to be careful about, not naming names and stuff, where people have total buy-in and where they sort of do it a bit half-assed.
Yeah.
The total buy-in, of course, everything doesn't work, but you give yourself a much better chance overall of winning the war. But you don't even win the battles if you're sort of doing it in a half-assed way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, look, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to not let you get away without mentioning the PS question in a bit. But before we move on to that, can you remind us where we can find your personal blog and also all the resources and the blog at MaxCDN as well, please?
For sure. So my personal blog is robertgibb.me /blog. And right now I'm writing a lot about content marketing for tech startups. And I'm doing a piece on minimum viable content, so people can learn more about that there. As for MaxCDN, definitely check out our blog, maxcdn.com/blog. And the visual glossary I was talking about, that's maxcdn.com/1/visual-glossary. And that's doing really well for us, so you might want to mimic that.
Wait for it, listeners. Here comes the PS question.
Okay, this is what I call the PS question. Could you please share one advanced content marketing tactic that we can use right after this episode?
Everyone can do this. So I'm stuck on this visual glossary thing just because it's doing so well for us. So I know you're doing this, Laws, on your site. You have a glossary. And what I would recommend doing is, splitting those terms up into separate articles and then adding something like either a diagram, maybe a whiteboard drawing, some kind of sketch, maybe a short video. And I think you'll be amazed at the results you see from doing this single thing, because people are looking for, if you think about it, people are searching in Google for single terms. Answer it well enough and you're going to come up. You're going to get a ton of traffic. And if you want to turn that traffic into something, have a call to action on the side, maybe saying like get a term of the day, or subscribe them to your weekly newsletter or whatever it is. But minimum viable content like that, that's a huge win that you can start building today and you can scale it out.
Robert Gibb, if I could reach through the screen and shake your hand, I would, because I've got about 550 terms in my glossary and it gets massive traffic. I think it's still number 3 on Google for content marketing glossary. It wasn't a very good term at the beginning, but it's turned into one because of exactly the searches you're talking about. I've got about another 100 terms to add into that glossary, but I haven't got around to it yet. And I was thinking, I've got to repurpose this stuff because, it's getting a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And I've been looking to do a video series, which I've just started doing. So now I'm probably going to do exactly what you've just said in a short video with a whiteboard, which I'm putting up at this very moment.
That's awesome.
And then go through in detail each of those terms and explain it in a sort of 5-minute video.
That is awesome. Yeah, create a landing page for each of those terms, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of success with it.
And I can just work my way through from A to Z.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. Right, fantastic. This is why I love doing a podcast. I've just got a great revenue generating idea for my own blog. So thank you very much for your time, sir. And I wish you all the very best with everything in future.
Yeah, Lars, thanks a lot. It's been really fun.
You've been listening to the Content Champion podcast, available at contentchampion.com and on iTunes. Until next time, thanks for listening.